The night my mother told my sister a lot of things, the ceiling fan stopped mid-spin, as if the house itself wanted to listen. I remember standing in the corridor, barefoot on the cold marble floor, holding a glass of water that trembled in my hand. I wasn't meant to hear anything. But secrets have a way of finding the ears they are meant to wound. My mother's voice was low, careful, threaded with something I had only heard once before, fear disguised as authority. My sister's voice answered softly, like a child being taught how to survive a storm. Between them was a closed door, and between me and that door was my entire life, balanced on a moment I could not step away from. I am the elder daughter, the one who learned early how to swallow questions, the one who became strong not because she wanted to, but because no one else would. That night, as I leaned against the wall and listened, I realized strength can be stolen without a sound. Men don't love women like you, my mother said to my sister. They use them. You must be careful. Learn before it's too late. I felt something snap inside me. Women like you. The words slid under my skin like a blade. My sister, gentle, trusting, always hopeful, was being handed a version of the world shaped by my mother's regrets. And I, the daughter who had already been through fire, was being rewritten without my consent. My mother had always spoken in fragments, never full truths. She believed love was a currency that ran out. She believed sacrifice was the only language women spoke fluently. And most of all, she believed silence was safety. That belief had cost her more than she ever admitted. As children, my sister and I shared everything: clothes, secrets, dreams whispered under thin blankets. But somewhere along the way, my mother began pulling her aside, telling her things she never told me. Warnings, instructions, versions of the past edited carefully to leave me out. I didn't know then that I was already the example, the failed experiment. I had married for love. A mistake according to my mother. I had taken a job in a male-dominated office. Rebellion. I had trusted people without calculating their capacity for betrayal. Weakness. By the time I realized how much of my story had been used as a lesson for my sister, it was too late to stop the damage. That night I went to my room and locked the door. The walls smelled faintly of jasmine from an old air freshener. I sat on the bed and stared at my hands, the same hands that once signed a marriage contract with hope, the same hands that later packed a suitcase in silence. My husband had been charming in public, absent in private. He had promised partnership and delivered control. When I confronted him about the late nights and unfamiliar perfume on his shirts, he laughed first, then punished me with coldness. Betrayal doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes it arrives calmly like paperwork. I left that marriage with nothing but my pride and a reputation my mother never defended. She is difficult, she told relatives. Too independent. Too emotional. And now, behind that door, she was making sure my sister didn't become me. The next morning my sister avoided my eyes. She moved around the kitchen quietly, as if noise itself could cause consequences. My mother watched me carefully, measuring my reactions, wondering how much I knew. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask what exactly she had told my sister about me. But years of emotional discipline held my tongue hostage. Instead I went to work. The office smelled of coffee and ambition. My boss smiled like a man who believed kindness was weakness. I had earned my position, but every day felt like a test I was expected to fail. A rumor followed me there too, about why my marriage ended, about my attitude. During lunch I stared at my phone, wondering if my sister would ever call me again the same way. Wondering if my mother's words were already building walls between us. That evening, I found a folded piece of paper in my sister's notebook. My name was written on it, followed by a list of things. Don't trust easily. Don't love blindly. Don't become like her. My breath caught in my throat. I realized then that this wasn't just about advice. It was about control. About shaping one woman by breaking another. And as I stood there, holding that paper, I made a quiet promise to myself. If my story was being used as a warning, then I would rewrite the ending. But I had no idea how deep my mother's words had already gone. And what my sister was about to do next would change everything. The first time my sister lied to me, it was small enough to seem harmless. She said she was meeting a friend, but I saw her later at a cafe with a man I recognized too well. He worked in my office. He had smiled at me once with interest I deliberately ignored. My mother's words were moving faster than I imagined. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I had learned that truth, when delivered too soon, can be weaponized against you. Instead, I watched. Listened. I began collecting silences the way some people collect evidence. At work, things grew colder. Project I led was suddenly reassigned. My boss praised my effort but questioned my stability. That word again. Always that word. I knew someone had been talking. I just didn't know who. At home, my mother acted kinder than usual. She cooked my favorite meals, asked about my day, smiled more. Guilt often dresses like affection. Took me years to recognize it. One night, my sister finally broke. She came into my room after midnight, eyes red, hands shaking. She sat on the floor like she used to when we were children. "Am I like you?" she asked suddenly. The question hit harder than any insult. "What does that mean?" I asked carefully. She hesitated. Then the words spilled out. Everything my mother had told her. About my marriage. About my job. About how I provoked betrayal by being too strong, too opinionated, too visible. About how survival meant compromise, and love meant silence. I listened without interrupting, even as something inside me cracked open. "Did you ever ask me?" finally said. "Did you ever ask me what happened?" She looked at me then, really looked, as if seeing a stranger for the first time. "No," she whispered. That was the moment I understood the true cost of my mother's fear. It wasn't just controlling our lives, it was turning us against each other. I told my sister the truth. Not the edited version. Not the heroic version. The real one. About how I tried to fix my marriage alone. About how I begged for honesty. About how betrayal feels less like anger and more like humiliation that sinks into your bones. I told her how work became my refuge and my battlefield. How I learned to smile while being doubted. How independence isn't freedom, it's responsibility without backup. She cried quietly, covering her mouth, as if afraid the truth might escape and ruin her. "I didn't want to end up alone," she said. "Neither did I replied. "But being alone isn't the worst thing. Being erased is." The next day, everything exploded. My sister confronted my mother. I wasn't there, but I heard the echoes. Voices raised, doors slammed, years of buried resentment finally breathing. When my mother came to me later, her eyes were sharp with anger. "You filled her head with nonsense," she said. "You want her to suffer like you did." That was the moment something inside me went quiet. "No," I said calmly. "I want her to choose for herself." Silence followed. Heavy. Dangerous. At work I was called into a meeting. Accusations disguised as concerns. I defended myself with facts, not emotion. When I walked out, I knew my time there was ending, either by resignation or force. That evening, my sister told me she was leaving the house. She had applied for a job in another city. Alone. My mother sat in the corner, stunned by the loss of control. As I helped my sister pack, I realized empowerment doesn't always look like victory. Sometimes it looks like loss that finally stops hurting. But as my sister hugged me goodbye, she whispered something that made my heart race. "There are more things she didn't tell you about your father." And just like that, the past cracked open again, threatening to drag me into a truth I was never meant to survive. My father had always been a shadow in our house. Present, silent, distant. I thought his absence was emotional, not intentional. I was wrong. After my sister left, my mother finally spoke. Not out of kindness. Out of exhaustion. She told me things she had hidden for decades. About choices made out of fear. About how she taught us survival because she never learned joy. About how my father's betrayals shaped her into a woman who trusted no one, not even her own daughters. "I was trying to protect you," she said. "No," I replied softly. "You were trying to protect yourself." That night I didn't sleep. I lay awake, listening to the house breathe, feeling grief for a childhood that could have been gentler. The next morning I resigned from my job. People thought I had lost everything. In truth, I was finally free. Took time. I healed. I rebuilt. Not as a daughter, not as a wife, not as an example, but as a woman who chose herself without apology. Months later my sister called. She sounded stronger, lighter. "I'm not afraid anymore," she said. I smiled through tears. Neither was I. But as I hung up the phone, I realized something chilling. Some truths set you free. Others prepare you for a war you didn't know was coming. And my story wasn't over yet.